Welcome back, and Dr. Bob, you have this 10-point video about 10 steps Obama's taking leading to the rise of the beast. America has been sequentially taken over more and more by Europe, and I think under his tutelage, Europe is the United Nations, which is literally a proxy of Europe. You have to understand the UN, although it was set up in New York City, the 57 of the nations are actually parts of the British Commonwealth or parts of the former European empires. And, of course, the current engine of the economy of Europe is Germany, including their science. In fact, if it wasn't for our German science, it wouldn't be a space program. Modern genetics or a lot in medicine. It's basically German science that was pillaged during the war. And it was Germany that was hauled into the First and Second World War by means of bankers because they wanted to counteract the rising force of German science. I think that the scientific advances are likely to be the major thing that are going to propel Europe into becoming a super empire. A lot of that science actually is coming from American secret agencies that will be explored and expanded in Europe. And of course, America has been fully taken over, so it's just another proxy of the, if you want to call it a colony again, of Europe. But I believe that Europe will rise like the Bible says, and your points are well taken. I think it's technology that's going to drive it.
Right. As you know, we talked about a book I wrote here before. I mentioned 2012 book, in the first segment. But in this segment, I wrote this book called Barack Obama, Prophecy and the Destruction of the United States. And in there, I went through European technology. We mentioned the Large Hadron Collider. Also, they have something in Germany called the FAIR, which is another advanced one that they're working on. But one of the things you and I were talking about during the break is that when you look at the scriptures, you see this beast power is going to rise up. It's going to make the world wealthy somehow, because when it collapses, the world is upset. Well, I don't think it's going to because they're necessarily just because they're going to find, let's say, a bunch of oil in Germany or something, or a bunch of rocks, some minerals. It would appear that we're talking about technology. Technology is what makes sense. It would also make people marvel at a power rising up. And you mentioned some points on the...
Well, yeah, I mentioned, just before we're going, I mentioned 3 areas. I expect Europe will they'll publicly expose 3 areas. Number 1, limitless energy for nuclear fusion technology, which is helium-3. Number 2 is genetic engineering that will allow them to eliminate many illnesses, including life extension. And number 3, I expect the access to supercomputing, not just for universities, for example, right across America from the University of California, San Francisco, right through to Champaign, Illinois, and the Ivy League universities, they have what's called supercomputing. But I think supercomputing will be available in Europe to many centers. For example, many cities in Europe have high-speed fiber optic. We are way behind here in America. And supercomputing, particularly if using the proper kind of programming, can simulate everything from medical systems to chemicals to information technology and non-linear systems. And it will transform everything, including financial markets, building things, which is 3D printing. You can have a 3D printer in your garage that can actually make something that otherwise would take a giant factory. And I think Europe will be the leaders of this kind of technology. It won't be China because the Europeans are very innovative. And I think you'll see the rise of Europe on technology.
Right, and that's what I've been saying. On the air, I've been saying it in books for years. Because again, looking at biblical prophecy, to me, that seems to be the logical thing.
Well, we see it even in our nutraceuticals. We have specific worldwide licenses for specific nutraceuticals that no one else has access to, like our leptin metabolic, like our diamine oxidase with the proper particle size. And these are all European companies that have developed these in Switzerland and Germany and France and elsewhere. And we have exclusive agreements with them. So they're European, and their system lends to innovation. And they don't have the regulatory rigmarole that we have here in America that crushes innovative science. And again, in Far East countries like in China, the people are actually trained right out of it so that they don't dare try to innovate or they can lose their life. It's dangerous in China to be an innovator.
Yeah, and over in Europe is what gets me over in Europe is you look at the United States and we all pretty much speak the same language. At least our political leaders all speak English.
Right.
And they can't agree on on the budget, they can't agree on, or at least they tell us they can't agree on all this kind of stuff. And yet, Europe, where they don't even speak the same language, they're doing these things. And as you indicated, sometimes they're very pragmatic. Okay, they're just like, okay, well, we need to do this, and then they just do it.
Well, what they have is they have what's called almost a controlling priest class that are working with 7 languages at least. And they don't really have representative government. What they have is an oligarchy of a priest class of financial and scientific gurus that manage everything. And unfortunately, because the political system is so corrupt and stupid, that kind of system actually is more efficient, which is why some of the things, even about the current financial system in China, even though they have a mixture of communism and capitalism, it's a more efficient, in sense, capitalist system than the system we have here, although it crushes innovation, so they have to do industrial espionage to steal ideas from the West because they prevent innovation. But Europe doesn't have that problem. And although they have serious economic issues right now, they have a giant pent-up need to train their young people. And as they unleash these technologies, which, by the way, they've been sitting in a warehouse for years, helium-3 nuclear fusion technology, genetic engineering, and the idea of supercomputing for the public, which they already have. There's a Canadian company out of Vancouver developed a D system, which they're selling a pile to the U.S. government of their type of supercomputers. This is the kind of technology I expect that are going to come to the public, and it'll be the public, like Europeans or small corporations or guys in their garage, in a sense, are going to reinvent Europe. Europe is going to be a completely different place. And, limitless energy, genetic engineering, and supercomputing. And unfortunately, the beast empire that rises will try to control everything in every country as well.
And that's the way they tend to think. They like to make the rules, and they want the rest of us to follow along with them.
Well, they want to have a financial system where they rope in China and Russia and the BRICS nations to make a deal. And since they're the customers, so if the Russians and the BRICS nations don't agree, their economy crashes. So although Russia can threaten, in the long run, if they threaten the Germans to raise the price of gas and oil, the Russians will have no way to sell their gas and oil other than to China. China basically is building warehouses to store the stuff they build but can't sell. So what I see happening now is Russia and China will be wrestled into, as well as the BRICS nation, into an agreement with Europe, and Europe and their banking system, which has already captured America and the West. I mean, the Canadians are just part of Britain. I mean, they're owned from block, stock, and barrel. So are all the Commonwealth nations, in effect, owned or controlled by the British Empire reinvented called United Nations, because 57 of the voting nations of the United Nations are former British Commonwealth nations that are controlled through various agencies and boards by, in a sense, the same people of the City of London that control the world economy.
Well, what we're seeing now is definitely a shift, and I think a lot of people don't see what's happening. And again,
right.
you mentioned the YouTube video we just put up yesterday. If anybody wants to watch that, where again I go through 10 steps that have happened since 2009. And again, back then, it was obvious to me that we would see the Obama administration support the rise of this European power. And I said this on your show before. One of the first times I said this on another radio show, not yours, the hostess of the show called me a traitor because she said these things couldn't happen to the United States, and they are.
Well, they're happening by collaboration. I mean, many of these discoveries were made with trillions of dollars of money. Much of it was gained by illegal gains through the illegal drug trade, through corporations where there's no monitoring of the cash flow by the Senate and Congress, because it's all highly classified. It's like when I talk to my employee friends, patients, working at Lockheed Martin, to say, if you want to buy a $100 million custom-made supercomputer, no problem, no paper trail. But if you want to requisition floppy drives or pencils, you got to have a requisition. Pretty crazy, eh?
Quite crazy. Yeah. So anyway,
it is. Welcome back, and we have EMILE DETOFFLE, DDS, a Master of Engineering Electrical, from LessEMF, which is linked on our website for technologies. And again, lots of news we're going to be covering up in hour number 3 with Tim Alexander. And in the last segment of this hour, we'll be talking about some other things as well, regarding especially things like Ebola, the expanding dangers of environmental degradation, and many other things that are happening in our world, including the latest research that I have from our VISTA gamma detection site and some observations I've been making along with our engineer David Crane. Emile, are you there?
I'm here.
Good. Let's talk today about some of the things that are going on with people, because what I almost feel like we're kind of electrical and electrotoxic prophets with our bag of honey and our locusts screaming to the top of our lungs to tell people that there's a problem. And because they can't smell it or see it, they don't see it. They don't hear it. And, of course, what's brought out in the news oftentimes is they'll have a little peep of an article that it's not written by a scientist, it's written by a info op to try to confuse the issue, try to say, oh, no, there's no danger to cell phones, they're fine, they're all certified by this and that. And, of course, they don't tell you that their certification is based on thermal standards that are 25 years out of date. They don't deal with things like the Bioinitiative Report or research from the Carroll Institute or our American Academy of Environmental Medicine experts or the Environmental Health Center of Dallas. So the fact is, we have a bunch of liars, and that's what they are. There's no way of getting around it. Pseudoscientists and just plain ignorant people. And that includes PhDs and MDs and other health professionals, including the regulatory agencies in the states, because they think they're shielded because they're public officials. They can get away with putting out stuff they know is lies, putting people in danger of electropollution, electrotoxins. I think if they knew, for example, you're dumping toxic waste in their front yard, they get in immediate danger. But when they dump toxic electrical waste in your home, they somehow think that they're protected, and they're not, because our federal lawsuit's going to have a very wide net. Tell us about what's going on, and how do we convince people to step-by-step using equipment that we talk about every week to take this seriously and to realize, hey, when you get that high-powered cell phone, you better watch that you're not putting it by your head. You better realize the number of minutes you spend on your iPad or in a highly toxic room. If you're not taking the right nutraceuticals, your body's toxic response eventually is going to precipitate illness. It's not a funny situation, and it's going to add to what I call a total toxic load that Dr. Ray talks about all the time. That's going to precipitate a lot of 21st century illnesses that the average doctor, health professional, is completely unprepared to diagnose.
Yeah, I know, you're absolutely right. And to that I would add two things. Number one is I just saw an article today about how the agencies that insure the electric utilities, so the big insurance companies that insure electric utilities, are very afraid of the problems with smart meters, and they're warning the utility companies that there's an avalanche of claims coming against problems with smart meters from fires, of course, like we've seen.
Yeah, well, that happened in Sask Power, where 12 smart meters went on fire, and Sask Power was ordered all the utilities there in Saskatchewan, Canada, to pull 105,000 meters from homes and businesses. So this war against smart grid and smart meters has just started, and it's a danger to physical equipment, to burning out computers. It's a danger to gas lines and water lines, to actually causing degradation and fires and explosions. And it's also a danger to people with non-thermal injuries to their DNA and cellular induction of free radicals. So this is not a joke. In every realm, it's bad, and it's also an extreme cost to the system itself, the whole power grid system, thinking that if you smooth the power usage curve out by putting smart grid systems on and forcing people to do their laundry after 10 p.m. at night, it's somehow going to save your power lines, or it's going to reduce the need for greenhouse gas emissions and so on. It's all crazy. And it's not based on logic or science or economics.
No, it isn't. It's not. That's exactly right. The other issue that they're very afraid of is the ability of smart meters to be hacked. And in the problem there is twofold. Number one is that customers can hack the smart meter and find ways to underreport their electric usage. So they have an estimate in Puerto Rico. I don't know why in Puerto Rico, but in Puerto Rico they estimated that last year they lost $400 million of revenue to their utility companies from their utility customers because the smart meters had been hacked.
Well, it shows that they live in Puerto Rico, but
malicious hacking can take place, whereas a malicious hacker could come and shut off your electricity or shut off the electricity to certain appliances in your house. And so if you're in there and you're on a ventilator, or you have you have a freezer full of food, or you have other reasons why you have an urgent need to have electricity, maybe you're a hospital, maybe you're a store, imagine a grocery store at the mercy of a hacker who can shut off the electricity at will. Imagine
well, we know also
the
from
waste and spoilage and inconvenience and financial loss that would be caused.
We also know that hackers can change the duty frequency of the power grid and burn out step-down transformers, burn out computers, burn out power line systems, including backup power systems for nuclear reactors. In fact, we know if we had a major power blackout, we would have most of the American nuclear reactors within 48 hours will go critical. We would have China syndromes all over the country that would make the Fukushima Daiichi problem look like a party. And we have many, many more reactors across America, 104 sites with sometimes multiple reactors. So if people think it's no big deal, they are facing reality that power blackouts, whether it's cybernetic attacks or coronal mass ejections, whatever cause, or extreme weather, we aren't ready for it, and it'll cause major nuclear release. Major nuclear release.
Right. Well, and so how do you convince people to wake up and start to take some action? It was a couple of years ago when we were visited by the local news team. They came and they were going to do a story on cell phones. And the reporter, he's a nice guy, but he's a little skeptical of the cell phone radiation issue. He was sort of a stoic, low-key kind of guy, and I could tell he was coming to do an article to show that all these quacks are out here warning us about cell phones. So he came to the office with his camera crew, and they were filming, and I said, listen, do you own a cell phone? And he says, well, sure, I use it all the time for my work. And I said, do you mind if we measure the amount of radiation coming out of it? And he thought, oh, that would be great. Let's get this on film. So
right.
I brought out the meter, the same meter that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gigahertz Solutions, German.
That's the one.
Top
the
quality.
Nice digital readout, and the one that makes the sound when it detects a signal. So I turned it on in our office, and there was just a very, very low background level, like there is anywhere you go because of Wi-Fi and cell phone communications, TV stations, and so on. So we're walking around the building, and it's very low, very quiet, and so not very exciting at all. So I said, well, go ahead and make a call on your phone. So he takes out his phone, and he puts it to his head, and he makes a call. And the meter then, I'm standing, next to him, not sticking the meter up to his nose or anything. And the meter went off like wild. He dropped his phone. He was shaking. If you get yourself a meter and make measurements, you won't believe what you find.
Right. Well, another thing is walk.
That footage didn't make it into his report either.
I'll bet it didn't. He'd get fired. He'd also walk into your kitchen 12, 15 feet away and point it at your microwave cooking your dinner, and it'll scream like a banshee, as they say in Ireland. Welcome back, and how do we convince people? I don't know. Go toe-to-toe with them, stare them down in their hairy eyeballs, they say in the military. Take out their cell phone and say, do this, and I'll pull up your gigahertz solutions. I'm not sure what the heck you do. I mean, people are darn stubborn, and they try to kind of take high moral ground and kind of stare you down and say, I know I'm right because I feel like I'm right, and you can't prove to me because I can't smell that electropollution. So until your guy dropped his cell phone, I'm sure he was like, he was very stoic and very tough, and I'm a good journalist, and you can't prove it to me. And until you pull out this meter, I'm sure he reached what's called a freak-out point, where he realized, I'm a stupid, self-destructive idiot, and I am using the cell phone a lot, and I'm probably cooking my brain, right? And I bet that kind of that taught him a lesson that a lot of people in our modern age don't understand what they're exposed to, whether it's Fukushima or scalar radiation or toxic genetically modified foods with glyphosates. And the average doctor, health professional, or even professional trainer is just damned ignorant. And I have to, what I do is I love people, but I treat their ignorance with a kind of, I call it the intellectual violence. I don't treat it nice. I treat people nice, but I don't treat their intellectual ignorance nice. And I stomp on it, and I threaten them. I say, hey, I dare you to prove to me that you're right. Prove to me you're right. Take out a meter and prove to me you're right, that there's no pollution here, or that your wires aren't cooking you with radiation. People don't even know, for example, these liquid crystal display televisions give off a lot of radiation. If you don't put something like a sterilizer on your house, you walk all around, people say, hey, I'm so proud, I put LEDs everywhere and these curlicue lights. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you got lots of electropollution. You just walk around the home with that oscilloscope that you get from the same company from Germany.
Right.
And you look at it and say, my gosh, there's electropollution everywhere. You see clouds of electropollution as you walk around the home, and you see the meter going nuts, and the frequencies gives you a spectral analysis of the frequencies, and you realize these are the similar frequencies that the cells communicate with each other. And I'm just boggled. I'm also telling people the same nutraceuticals and a protective, you need three things. You need basically a protective material. You need to remediate the source of the problem, and you need to take nutraceuticals to protect you from, quote, cellular and metabolic stress. So if your levels of magnesium are low or selenium are low, if you have low levels of zinc and antioxidants, you're going to stress your tissues, and eventually if they go to the zone of compensation to decompensation, you're going to get diabetes, cancer, heart disease, depression. All kinds of really bad things are going to happen to you because you've pushed yourself out of that zone where you can compensate into a zone where your body can't cope with it anymore.
Right. And I wonder how many people are listening here and thinking, yeah, I should, but as soon as I start to think about it, I become overwhelmed because it seems like it's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot. I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to start doing yoga and that kind of thing. But it's not. It's not a lifestyle change. It's not, selling all your possessions and going and living in the woods. It's just about making some intelligent decisions.
Oh, yeah.
What you
I hear
do
people taking
and how you do.
I tell people these three things: remediate, protect, which you can sometimes just have to protect yourself with different barriers. Remediate, measure and protect. That's number 2, measure and protect. And number 3 is take the right nutraceuticals and diet to protect yourself from the radiation. You can't just do the first 2 and not do the third, which is why we have things like Cognition Plus to protect your brain, antioxidants like NutriDefense, minerals like magnesium glycinate malate. Even more so now because of toxic pollution and now radiotoxins, including Fukushima. If people don't take supplements now, their health is going to be done. We're dealing with a dying planet and a dying population. Although people think, well, we're living longer and healthier. No, you're not. No, I beg to differ. I see people getting sicker earlier and doctors struggling like crazy to keep people's carcass from actually assuming room temperature, but I don't think people are living longer and healthier at all. In fact, I see diseases rapidly increasing in severity, and people getting fatter, people getting more diabetic, people getting more mental illness. A good example is Robin Williams. How many minutes a day was he on his cell phone? The man was already having manic depressive illness. He was a genius, and it's very probable he committed suicide because his brain chemistry. If someone came to me, Dr. Biochemistry, the first thing I do is organic acids, gene SNPs, and find out what his neurotransmitter levels and his platelets were. And I've been doing that for 25 years. And I'd say, oh my gosh, look, this is why Robin's all screwed up, and that's why he's an alcoholic. He's trying to calm his nervous system down because it's overamped. Well, if you stress it with cell phones, Wi-Fi networks, and electropollution, a lot of people do go crazy and become alcoholics or drug addicts. They're trying to medicate themselves back into normal. And that's one of the big problems is people don't see the end from the beginning. They don't realize maybe his home was electropolluted. Maybe he was toxic from using the cell phone too much because he was having financial problems. Maybe he's on the cell phone 10 hours a day. Who knows all the factors that converged took a person who was predisposed to being manic depressive to put into a really deep hole of depression that his biochemistry and his brain couldn't get out of, which is why he hung himself with a belt. People want to look at the end of it, but they don't realize, well, what are the factors? We can speculate, but we got to put stress in all of its forms, including electropollution stress, is one of the factors that makes people physically, emotionally, and biochemically act abnormal, including cancer, autoimmune diseases, depression, and suicide. It's a very important thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I want to encourage people that if you're inclined at all to take action on this, start with one step. Do one step at a time. Do one thing that makes sense to you, that makes the most sense to you. Do one thing that you can measure the difference on so that you can see before and after. And then if you want to take the next step, get some help. Call us, get in touch with Dr. Deagle, ask him what we should do next. We'll be happy to guide you because it's a process for sure, But it's not a big, laborious process. It's not an overwhelming process. Do one thing. Do the worst thing first. Take care of that. Make your life 90% better. And then move on to the second thing and the third thing. You know, the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the trouble comes from 20% of the... it's caused by 20% of the population and vice versa. So start with the worst. Deal with that and move on from there. The worst is usually the things closest to you, right? It's rarely what you see outside your window. It's usually what's going on right in your own home, whether it's your own microwave oven, your own Wi-Fi, your own cell phone.
Well, one of the a good example is I contacted years ago the primary research center for looking at melatonin release in anti-cancer is the University of Colorado, and I've known the researchers there personally for years. And what happened is that they weren't far from my office in South Denver, and these guys were doing very, very good research, proving that if you were insomniac, not only did your C-reactive protein, PI1, and inflammatory markers go through the ceiling, but your ability to fight cancer literally became zero, or very darn close to it. So if you're predisposed to getting breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, you're going to get the sucker. Now, if you aggravate your genes because you've got biotoxins, you're not detoxifying heavy metals, amalgams, gutta percha and cadmium from root canals, breathing in Fukushima Daiichi garbage, so you're predisposed now to all the nastiness from that. And then you've got a cell phone snapped to the side of your head like you're a cyborg. What do you think is going to happen? Well, bad things will happen. And the problem is that one of the first things that happens is no melatonin. When you stress the brain, the hypothalamus says we're in shock. We can't normally release melatonin anymore, so one of your major anti-cancer and free radical blockers throughout the entire body is melatonin. It just stops. You don't get any more. And if you get insomnia, it doesn't take long not to just get crazy, but to get it really, really inflamed in every tissue of your body. And if you want to have a heart attack or stroke, go insomniac for a few weeks or months. And you will have a heart attack or stroke. Your C-reactive protein will go into orbit. It's true.
One of the biggest complaints that we hear from people who have become electrically sensitive is the difficulty sleeping. When they're exposed, they can tell, like when they travel and they stay in a hotel and the hotel has Wi-Fi or their room is near the elevator shaft and it's electrical there. Insomnia is one of the first things
real bad
that they report. Absolutely.
Yeah, their brain is into warning. Their whole brain is into alarm phase.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emil.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll see you next week, same time, and we'll keep on hammering away. And hope
your mind often
come back, and we have Dr. Bob Thiel. Bob Thiel actually was on earlier. We have Bob Vineyard talking about pure water systems. Bob, I'd like you to highlight on how bad the situation is in terms of Fukushima Daiichi, in terms of toxic, garbage in your water from toilet to tap water in many cities across America and the world. We have people buying the systems, by the way, the pure water system in Europe, and if they contact you and send photos of exactly how their plumbing pieces, so they actually get the spec sheets out to you, you can probably get an adapter so they can hook up their BEV 100 or 300 system to their plumbing system. It's a really big issue, and people thinking that they can just get a zero water, one of these little filters you put in your fridge, or they get a Berkey or some other system that will pull out cysts and parasites but not viruses, and not kill off all pathogens or remove bisphenol A or other toxins, including even distilling systems. It really is a minefield for those people who think they're listening to someone qualified to talk to them, and they really are being told stories by salesmen. It's pretty disturbing, actually.
It really, thanks, Dr. Bill, for having me back on your show. It really, of course, as somebody in the water business, I've been in the business now for 30 years. Of course, I had some other career paths along the way, but I've always been around water since 1984. And, the situation certainly hasn't got any better. The number of new chemicals that are introduced to the environment, excuse me for just one moment. I have some other things going on here.
You just want to turn it off and...
Yeah, it's all good. I'm killing it all.
As long as they know how to do CPR, they can just keep on doing compressions and ventilations. They'll be fine.
Well, I was helping a customer in the Dominican Republic do some setting up his booster pump on his system, and this is the benefit of FaceTime, is that you can, sit there and walk somebody through it very quickly and simply, and he's one of my new dealers in the Dominican Republic, so I was giving him some extra love.
So he's one of your dealers. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and he's putting a system in-house. He needed a pump, and so we're troubleshooting him a little bit. But the situation is just nasty. I mean, even the basics, get rid of the chlorine, which is a poison that causes carcinogens in your water, and that's just the fundamental. Then what about what's in the water? I mean, we could talk about the basics of contaminants, and we can go into a long laundry list of what's there. But I want to do a little twist on today, though. You've got nitrates and nitrites, the cause of blue baby syndrome. If you live in the mountain west, you might have uranium, radium, different radioisotopes in your water. If you live in the desert Southwest, you probably got arsenic in your water. If you live in New England, you probably got a handful of chemicals from the vast array of industrial development that happened over the last 150 years. If you live on the west coast of the United States, after you live anywhere in the world, you've got Fukushima radioactivity raining down on you every time it rains. This stuff gets into your water supply, and you just can't. There's nothing that gets it out that can be done with just a basic little filter. I would say the closest you can get is probably a distillation unit. Distillers can be good, but they're very expensive. They generate a lot of heat. They use a ton of electricity. They're a bother to keep clean because you got to descale them, and they got all kinds of parts to break. And if they're not designed properly, they don't get rid of everything. They don't get rid of all the asbestos fibers. They don't get rid of volatile organic chemicals, which distill right up with the water. They have a boiling point before water, so they evaporate as the water heats up. And guess what? Then as the water cools down, they also cool right into the distillate. And so, distillers have the potential to remove mineral salts, but they leave you vulnerable to volatile organic chemicals and certain fibers like asbestos. A carbon filter leaves you vulnerable to radioisotopes and mineral salts and heavy metals. And a deionization filter all by itself leaves you totally vulnerable to the organic pesticides, herbicides, industrial solvents. None of these are guaranteed removals for bacteria, cyst, and virus. And so each individual option that's available in the market leaves you vulnerable to one type of contaminant or another. And if you're going to spend money on a water filter, why in the heck would you spend your money and leave yourself vulnerable to a particular class of contaminants? I mean, why buy a carbon filter and leave yourself vulnerable to heavy metals? Why buy a distiller and leave yourself vulnerable to volatile organics? I mean, the only way to do this, if you're going to solve the problem and have pure water that you're confident has removed everything, is to combine technologies. Well, guess what? This isn't particularly new stuff. Pure Water Systems is new in the way that they introduced this type of technology in a residential application. But this technology is well proven, time and time again, used by Intel, used by Roche, used by the major pharmaceutical manufacturers, semiconductor manufacturers. You need ultra-pure water for those applications. So what do? Carbon filtration, because it gets rid of the organic molecules. Reverse osmosis, because it gets rid of the mineral salts and heavy metals. And then deionization, to get rid of all those things that the prior two methods did not remove. And then finally, some way to remove bacteria, cyst, and virus. Most of the lab systems are redundant. They'll also add ultraviolet as well as a 0.2 micron filter, just so that they have some redundancy built into the system. In our design, we put the 0.2 micron filter filter after the deionization to remove the bacteria system virus. Most other manufacturers just zap them with an ultraviolet light. Great. Now I've got a bug that can't, get pregnant, but it's still in me. That doesn't make any sense. So we take the bugs out. We don't leave them for you to drink. And Dr. Bill, I know you can confirm, it's oftentimes the RNA and the DNA that's in the cytoplasm of these bugs that causes the inflammatory response, hence the word pyrotoxin, from the Greek word for fire.
Yeah, we also, and we had a discussion on Friday, we talked to Dan Morrison about the use of chlorine in water to kill Ebola. First off, Ebola is very fragile. You don't need to use that in your water. You want to clean your water and pump it through a pure water system, number one. Number two, if you do need to use an antipathogenic, you want to use Nutrimedically, which is plasma diatomic activated, so it's not going to screw up your DNA. It's not going to cause chloramines, and it's not going to end up causing hypothyroidism. So, although it may be published by the military and other sites, I do not agree you want to chlorinate your water. In fact, you want to get the chlorine. The chlorine should be taken out at point of service. The reason why it's there is threefold. First, it's supposed to kill off bugs like salmonella and other bugs that grow that can get in your water supply. But it also prevents the calcification of the pipes. That's why they add fluoridated water. I found this out from water authorities here in Southern California. One of the primary reasons why they like fluoridation isn't to protect people's teeth. It's to protect their pipes from calcification, because the fluoride tends to prevent calcification of their pipes or buildup of debris inside the pipes. And the third reason why I think chlorine is particularly dangerous is because we're getting all kinds of reasons for DNA adducts, including now, it turns out that if you use Splenda, you're going to release chlorine gas inside your cells when they digest. And the chlorine actually forms dioxins, which are an antifolate, dioxins and dibenzofurans, directly block folic acid conversion or methylation. So you really screw up your methylation pathways if you're exposed to chloramines. It forms DNA adducts, so it screws up your DNA. Bad stuff. So don't use it. The cleanest water in the world is pure water system water. Bev 100 system on your tap. Bev 200 tackle box system for emergencies. Bev 300 under the sink. Whole host system. And if you use the code NutriMed, NUTRIMED, you save 10% going through Nutrimedical. And all you have to do is go through the link at NutriMedical.com, or if you call, going through the link to Pure Water Systems, you're going to get Bob Vineyard, the master of clean water. Will help walk you through it. It's the best system on the planet. Great for emergencies, BEV 200 system. This is what you need. And if you want to help countries like these third world countries exposed to toxic exposure, they're not going to get Ebola in their water supply. They're going to get it in droplet spray, lack of equipment, gloves. We have things like full body suits they should be sending, biohazard equipment, etc. Thank you, Bob. Stay right there. We got time for another show next week. We have